Okay. Good morning, Sid. I'm very excited to be talking to you for May Writers Read. How are you today?
I'm fine. I was going to say I'm very tall, but I'm not because I'm sat down, so I'm probably just average size now. But I'm fine. Thank you very much. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, and yes, I remember your height from when we met, and the picture in the background, and you were very tall. You are very tall, but very well dressed, and I see you've got a beautiful shirt on today as well.
I used to be a lot taller when I had hair, probably about 3 or 4 inches taller.
Right.
So that's what happens. And in fact, I used to stay in Amsterdam, and it wasn't until I came back here with my father-in-law that he pointed out I was tall for a Scottish person, because in Holland I looked very average. But when we came here, and he saw me in a crowd one day, and he realised that I was much taller than Scottish people who tend to be, let's say, smaller, aren't they?
Yeah, although the younger Scottish people
They
tend to be are tending to be taller. I've noticed that.
It's a nice thing. Nice thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you've been really busy. You've been trying to do 44 gigs this year. Is that right?
I have, yes. This is my 44th year of performing live with my poetry. And I decided in January I would mark the occasion by doing 44 gigs. But of course, I was a bit nervous because there was still a pandemic happening and everybody was kind of encouraged to stay at home. And I never thought I'd get anywhere near it. But last week, I think I did gig number 31. So, which is down in Glasgow, actually. Yeah, I was down in Glasgow in Kate's Bar. It was a very lovely venue and very well received. So I think I have to slow down now, or I'll be in gig number 65 by the end of the year.
Yeah, you're kind of getting a bit ahead of yourself, but mind you, it's probably good to get them done before the sort of the winter is with us. So
yes, also I think things are a bit quieter in the summer as well, and I'd rather be outside in my garden than in a pokey, small, dark place doing poetry.
Yeah. Will you be doing anything at the Edinburgh Fringe, Sid?
No, I don't think so. Thank you for asking, though. Will you be?
No, I won't be either. Nick's the Fringe this year.
I thought, let's close it right down. No, I didn't. No, so let's put it this way. The answer is no, because I didn't feel I wanted to organize that. Because things were very uncertain, I thought if I go and book something, which costs money, and the pandemic comes back, let's just hold off. So, and I was going to do it. I'd looked maybe beginning of 2020, I started to have a look, and I found a venue, and then of course everything closed down. So I'll see how it goes this year, and then maybe next year I might go back and do it. But the last time I did it would be in the 80s, I think. Right. So it's been quite a long time. Right. But to do at least one more show at the Edinburgh would be quite nice.
Be really nice. Now you must have started when you were 2, because you tell me you've been doing this for 44 years. So come on.
So I think I must have started in 1978. So I'd be in my late teens at the time, and I was, as I say, 4 or 5 inches taller because I had all this sticky up sort of hair. So I used to get called a punk poet, which I thought was very disrespectful. I happened to be a punk, but the poetry was not punk poetry, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I was up doing a thing at the weekend, a family show at a church hall, and they had billed me as a punk poet, where I actually am more like a grandfather with attitude. And I thought, how strange. I was doing poems about snakes and fish and snails and toads and things for children, and they had me billed as a punk poet. So I did start a long time ago when I was young, and I still do some of the same poems now, but stuff that people thought was outrageous at the time, really outrageous because it wasn't in vogue, now is in vogue and very friendly, and I can go along to primary schools and perform exactly the same material to people's grandchildren, the same people that would chase me out of town for doing inappropriate material. And it was only inappropriate because people weren't doing that type of thing at the time.
It's interesting how the whole genre of poetry has really opened up and expanded, hasn't it?
It has. Been nice to see. And I haven't, although I say I've been performing for 44 years, which is true, I've been doing other things as well. I mean, I had a cup of tea, I would go to sleep, I'd get up in the morning, have another cup of tea. I had some work to do. I had some children to look after. So I had times where I didn't do very much and times I was very busy. And I remember actually when this book came out, when I took out my book, or my last book, I think it was about 2011. And I stayed in Amsterdam, but I was going across to London a lot. And I was invited to go and do these open spoken word events. And that's when I realized how different it was. It really, really changed. And you see it evolving over the decades, I guess.
Yeah.
When I started, very old people, who are probably me now, very old people went to libraries and read poetry to each other. about salmon that would leap into the air or whatever. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. And the only place I could actually get any gigs was to perform with rock bands or punk bands, as they were at the time. So I would go and do all these rock shows in front of all these punks and new wave people, because there was just no venue. There was just nothing at all. And then when I started going to London about 10 years ago, there was whole venues for spoken word with 200 people in the room with packed audiences. And it really had evolved and really changed.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about my elastic brain, Sid.
Mr. Elastic Brain. So
Mr.
actually,
Elastic Brain, sorry.
I've worn this shirt because this shirt can make the book disappear. If you notice, I'm going to stand up. I wish I was a bit thinner for this, but it goes across and you'll see the book completely disappears because the shirt is actually the front cover of the book. Brilliant. And really impressive. And it took me, I would say, an hour and a half just to find the shirt upstairs in my new wardrobe.
Well, thanks for looking.
I was doing it. Well, I needed something to do for an hour before I came online, so that was it. So when I do this at school, or when I was taking it into schools before the shutdown, I would show the children the book disappearing, and I would say 90% of the children played along with it and would cheer. And, yay, it's disappeared. But there'd always be some people saying, no, I can still see it, it's just the book. And those are the children which I've never been seen again, actually. And I just blamed it on COVID, yes.
They disappeared, right. So along with the shirt.
Along with the shirt, yes. Mr. Elastic Brain, The Life and Poems of Sid Ozalid. So I was encouraged by a man called Ian, actually. Ian is a man who does the sound for Pete Doherty. So Pete Doherty is kind of a little bit famous for taking drugs and dating Kate Moss and doing rock and roll. And Ian is his sound man. And Ian used to play in a group called APB. And Ian and I had individually supported people like The Clash. And Ian had invited me before the pandemic to go to New York and do some things with his band. And he encouraged me to write a book. And I was saying, no, I don't want to write a book. And yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then we agreed that if I did it for charity, which is for mental health, for mind, for better mental health, if I could give the money to charity, then I felt energized to write the book. So that's what I did. And I made lots of money for them. So the first part of the book is actually just about my background and my struggles of trying to perform poetry in different places on television and on radio and on stage over a number of years, and a bunch of very strange escapades. And then there's a number of poems that I have performed virtually all live on stage over maybe about a 35-year period. And the book went on sale, went into the Amazon poetry charts very, very quickly, which was nice. And what I noticed was whenever I went on the radio, it went up the charts. When I wasn't on the radio, it didn't go up the charts. When I performed live somewhere, books sold. So I'd be in the top 10 Amazon poetry for about 4 or 5 months, which was very nice. And I could never get to number 1. I was always stuck at number 2. And I noticed that dead poets were always number 1. So I was doing television, I was doing radio, I was doing live stuff. I was flying back and forward to London to do these gigs, really promoting myself, number 2. So anybody who's interested in buying the book, which is called Mr. Elastic Brain, do not buy the book until I'm dead. So when I die, rush out, buy the book, and woohoo, maybe I'll get to number 1 in the Amazon poetry charts.
Well, actually, anybody who's listening to this, I think it would be really nice if you rushed out and bought the book. Mr. Elastic Brain.
People send me photographs of them with the book every now and then because they have seen me or whatever, and they nicely order the book and then they send me a photograph, usually on my Facebook page, my Sid Ozalid Mega Fan Club page.
Well, it's definitely a worthwhile wee book for your poetry collections, everybody. Would you be kind enough to read for us this morning, Sid?
Yes, I'll do something which I've memorized. Most things I've actually when I perform, I normally do it from memory. I have a bad memory now because I got a brain injury about 4 years ago. And I wasn't walking and talking very well. And I've been using my poetry as a way to aid my recovery. And part of that is to make myself remember my own poems, because I'd forgotten them all, and then try and perform them from memory. Does that make sense? Yeah. So although it's a read with Sid, Sid's not going to read, he's going to try and do it from memory.
That's brilliant.
This is the thing called Mrs. Polythene. I'll take my glasses off because I won't be reading. You look so much blurrier now. And,
bloodier or blurrier? I wasn't sure what you said.
I was getting my eyes tested on last Saturday. So this eye, I've actually got very good long vision This one, not good long vision. So this one means I don't need glasses for driving. This one, glasses for driving.
Right.
Both of them glasses for reading, but now blurry. So it's called Mrs. Polythene. And this is people who wrote in, I did this on television in the 80s, and people wrote in and complained because it was inappropriate. They wanted jokes about mother-in-laws and all the stuff that they got used to in the 60s and 70s. I think they'd be called racist jokes now or homophobic jokes now, but that's what they're used to. And I was doing stuff about invisible ladies. So they wrote in and complained about me, which encouraged me to do more of it, of course. And these are the poems I now do for their grandchildren. So it's called Mrs. Polythene. Has anyone seen Mrs. Polythene, the incredible invisible woman? Although she's never seen, she is very clean. Mrs. Polythene, the incredible invisible woman. She's got invisible eyes, invisible nose, invisible feet with invisible toes, invisible hair with invisible bows. And where she lives, nobody knows. She goes to the cinema and gets in free. She goes to the theatre and gets in free. She goes to the football and gets in free. To be invisible, I wish it were me. She's married to a plastic bag who calls himself Bin Liner. Her friends, they are all double glazed, though nothing could be finer. Has anyone seen Mrs. Polythene, the incredible invisible woman? Although she's never seen, she is very clean. Mrs. Polythene, the incredible invisible woman. To her children, she's transparent. Now's it. Oh, there we go. And the glasses are back up.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. You know, it's really interesting being a woman of a certain age, you know, that sort of invisibility that creeps on. I think it does happen to men too.
Oh, it does.
I do think,
just nobody, nothing at all.
Yeah.
So I actually notice it when I go to my gigs, because I don't know, 4 or 5 times older than the audience and most of the other young poets. It's great to be around them because there's real energy. And of course, you sit in the corner and you're completely invisible. Understandably, because you're just some old goat who's turned up in the wrong place. And then you perform and suddenly you are visible and they want to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I think the same of people of a certain age, you're just invisible, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm doing creative writing at Stirling right now, and I'm very fortunate to be in a very mixed cohort, although a lot of the cohort are young. And I do remember sort of saying to one of the young ladies, I said, "Oh, would you like to have a coffee?" And she said, "Yeah." We went and had a coffee together, and I said, "Thank you for hanging out with an old lady." And she went, "You're not an old lady, you're another writer." And I thought, brilliant. You know, that's so nice, isn't it? So yeah, when you're in that community and they see you perform, and they realize you're not the old goat who turned up wrong. You're actually really gifted and talented, and you made us all laugh. Yeah.
It's a nice feeling to be included, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Do you have something else you're going to read for us, or remember for us, whichever?
I'll do. Actually, these. What I normally say is there's 200 poems in here, 200 pages. So pick any number between 1 and 200. So if you pick any number between 1 and 200, that'd be nice, and I'll go to the appropriate page.
Okay. I'll pick 37.
Okay, 37, that's good. Now, luckily, 37 had this, can you see that? This little sticky in there, just so I wouldn't forget which one it was. It's just a joke I play and people fall for it. So this is called Margot, and I have 5 children, and this is one of my children. She's called Margot. It'd be a bit naughty using her. If she was called Fiona, but calling the poem Margot wouldn't really work. But she was born, I think, 36 years ago. If she's watching, maybe she was maybe born 20 years ago. So at the time, it's actually Margot with a T, and nobody used the name Margot with a T. Right. So my mother was convinced her name would be called Morag. You mean Morag, don't you? Now, no, it's Margot, but it's a silent T, and that was not acceptable at the time. I think my mother called her Morag till she went to school, then she gave up and had to call her Margot eventually. So this is for my daughter Margot. Margot. You thought I forgot to put the T into Margot. Oh no, I did not forgo the O in Margot. Margot J. Cairns. People ask you what the J stands for, and you say J, J-A-Y, and they say why, and you say it's lest you forgot your father was an idiot. Margot J. Cairns. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Does she enjoy that when you?
She does like, yeah, she enjoys it. She enjoys it now. And I did it, I was on, actually, when this book came out, I was on Tom Morton's show. Tom Morton was on BBC Scotland. So I was on there every week, actually, for most of that year. And I did a different poem every week, and she was really proud that when I did a poem for her.
Yeah.
And then last summer, we had some people in the garden doing some music, and she came along with her family, and I overheard a conversation where the singer was asking her what she thought of her dad doing poetry, and she said she used to really annoy her when she was young, because she was really embarrassed. And I was on the radio every week. I had my own radio show called The Invisible Radio, actually it was called. So she really hated it because people at her school were like, oh, you're Sid's daughter, and I'd get lost. And even some of the teachers used to listen to me on purpose and talk about it the next day, and she hated all that. But now she's older, she's really quite proud. And she likes the poem being for her, of course.
Wonderful. So did you have to write poems for all the children, or you just stayed with Margot?
I have poems for all the children. I have, yeah. That's why I stopped having children. I thought this is getting a lot of work. So and I spread the children out. I mean, I have 5, and there's 30 years between the oldest and the youngest. Right. That's because my bedroom, I have my own bedroom, and the door's locked, and every 12 or so years I open the door, and but it also gave me time to think of names of children and to write the poem. So sometimes I actually had the poem written for the child before the door was open. And I say, darling, do come in. I've written the new poem. The new child will be called Eva. This one's going to be called Daniel. I've got a poem. Although, unfortunately, it wasn't until Daniel was born I recognised it rhymed with spaniel, which was a bit of a shame for him.
It puts a whole new sort of context on choosing your children's name.
It does, yes. So, and I have a poem which is called "The Sheep Are on Fire," which is actually on YouTube. I think it has about 12,000 views or something. I wrote that for my youngest son, who's called Matthew, and we were still in Holland when he was born. And Aberdeen Football Club had just won a cup for the first time in many, many years. So I wrote him a football poem song, which we then put on YouTube, and lots of people watched it. Just because I knew he'd have no interest in football, and he would never ever support Aberdeen because they were such a bad team. So I thought if I do a poem and a song just for him, he might actually support them. And it's called "The Sheep Are on Fire." So that's Matthew's poem. So go and look it up, find it on YouTube.
Okay, we will do that. Sid, you've got some things you told me that were only available under your bed. I'm realizing that your bedroom has appeared quite a bit in this conversation.
That was a private conversation. I didn't think you'd bring it up now. Right, yes, I have.
Just to say, I've never been to Sid's bedroom, just to be clear about this.
You're very naughty. I'm silly, you're naughty. So I have these, because I did a show, I think about a month ago, and because of the brain injury, whenever I go and do stuff, I challenge myself to do something I haven't done before, if that makes sense. And so I'm always sort of having to memorize things, make myself memorize things, make myself deliver something. So what I did was, I did something from this little book called Front Page Sensation. It's actually the Sid Ozalid book of poetry and verse. The thing, it's got 6 titles, actually. And I made myself do something from this poem, this book. And there's a postcard. I used to sell these postcards at the gigs. Hang on, there we go. So I sold about 5,000 of these postcards, a thing called My Tortoise Come Burst into Flames. So when I would play with the Clash or the Specials or Simple Minds, people in the audience went home with one of these, which you could colour in. And I'd end up being invited to parties and see this up in the on a wall. And it had a nice poster inside it. And there's the, I think they do it that way, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Of me being very, very thin.
Wow.
And so that's a book. So I think they're now called chapbooks. And then it was just called a little book by this. And here's my record, which is from under the bed. So I've still got a few units to shift. I think that's it. And there's a little book in there. It's called the Songs and Stories from a Suitcase Extravaganza. And then there's a book with, I don't know if you can see that, with different cartoons and things.
Oh, brilliant.
There's all little poems and stories in there. And of course, this wonderful record that people can't play anymore because they don't have record players. Although I have one. But I don't just play this, I have other records I play as well. So I think this was in the late 70s and this would be in the early 80s.
Wow.
So I have these, that's what you're asking, that's what's under my bed. I have other things my bed, but they're going to stay there. And
maybe we'll move on now.
It's for nighttime activities. It's for oral nighttime activities. When I get hungry, I have chocolates and goodies and snacks under my bed.
Sid, do you mind talking a little bit about the experience you've had as a poet, having had the brain injury, and you said you lost your memory of being able to remember what you'd written, and then
Yes.
you recovered memory by just focusing on that. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Only if I can remember it. So, I'll take my glasses off for that. So, I don't know why. These are actually my invisible glasses. I tell children or the audience they're invisible. And mostly they go along with it, apart from that same boy from school who's escaped out the hood of my car, comes to the gig and shouts, "I can see your glasses." So 4 years ago, I banged my head, and it wasn't a big bang, but it had a big impact on me, on us. We were staying in Borneo because I moved from Amsterdam to Borneo. I was working my way through the alphabet. I had penciled in a move after 4 years to Canada, but we came back to Aberdeen because of that. And I wasn't walking very well. I wasn't talking very well. I really couldn't remember anything. Even day by day, everything was a struggle. Couldn't dress myself very well. Balance was very poor. And also the medical care there was very poor. So we went to Singapore quite often to get some support. Then eventually came back to, we had a house in Aberdeen, so we came back to Aberdeen. And I started doing rehab, and I realized that even though I was very confused all the time and couldn't really function, I still had this very, very silly, I still had lots of silly ideas in my head. So if somebody said something, I could come back with an answer. It wasn't necessarily a funny answer, but it was a silly answer. And I thought, wow, that bit of my brain is still working. I need to build on that. So with the rehab I was doing, which took different shapes, some of the rehab was water drinking. I'll demonstrate it now. I realized that exercising that part of my brain would be good for me. And I thought, right, I'm going to start performing again. But I couldn't remember any of my poems. And I'd always prided myself on my memory, which I no longer had. And I couldn't remember my work. But luckily, I had most of it in this book. So I could go and get the book. And I went along to a spoken word event in Aberdeen in a place called Spin. The event's called Speaking Weird. And I watched it 1 month. And I said, right, I'm going to do that the following month. And then my wife said, yeah. My wife had to take me places. So she came with me. And I actually unlocked my bedroom door and said, please take me out. And she took me out there. And the first time I went up, I took my book up. I read it from the book. And I was very unsteady on my feet. And noise, I used to find very, very difficult. So when they laughed, I almost fell over. And when they applauded, I kind of got, so I had to say, how can you go and do a gig and say, please don't laugh and please don't applaud? But I just got better at doing it, if that makes sense. And I also enjoyed it. And I realized doing something that you enjoy. I was spending all my time trying to rewire the roots in my brain. It's like a pathway in the forest. The more you walk on the path, the more that pathway develops. So I was trying to develop new pathways and new ways of doing things I'd done before. And I realized if I do something that I really enjoy, it becomes easier. So I started doing more and more and more of these gigs and having more and more fun. And even now I set myself a target of, right, I'm going to go and play in a comedy club. So I'm going to have to make up some jokes and remember them. So before I could make them up and remember them because I'd made them up. Now I have to write them down and practice and practice and practice. I go out for walks, maybe for 2 days before any gig, and I just go over the same words over and over and over again. So that's what I've been doing. But it's a fun way of doing it. It stimulates you. And as you say, there's young people there who like you and talk to you and include you, and they actually encourage you. And they're also part of that challenge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think what you've done is incredibly brave, and I'm so glad you've done it because we as your audience, we benefit from what you've done. But that journey of making that decision, making that recovery, and saying no, I'm having fun. I want to do this. I mean, a lot of people would maybe have given up, but you didn't. Yeah.
I hadn't realized that until I was reflecting on it the other day. We met with some friends who hadn't seen you for a while, and they were saying, well, you must have been terrified at the time because my whole life changed. I mean, everything I had planned in my life, I couldn't do, and my life took a completely different direction. And they said, you must have been terrified. And I remember thinking, no, I wasn't actually. I just realized I had to get better. And I might not get back to where I was before, but I'm always improving. And there's something in my own makeup, which is just come up with a target, not know how you're going to get there, but keep working and pushing yourself to get there.
Yeah.
And I've met people in the past, in the last couple of years, and they've told me that they're very surprised. There was a young lady I met when we were in Thailand doing some meditation stuff. And she said, oh, you're the same age as my father, and he's had a stroke. But he just doesn't do anything because he's had a stroke. He just given up. And I thought, really? And she was amazed that I hadn't given up. And I was amazed that he would give up.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of 2019, for 10 years prior to that, I've been recording little songs and poems with a man called Jim Shepard. He calls himself Jimmy Jazz. So it's Sid Ozalid and Jimmy Jazz. And we put out a record at the end of 2019 called Nene Boy, which was played on the radio in different countries, which was very nice. And it even got into the charts at number 43 in Greece, of all places. Oh. You can go and check Nene Boy by Sid Ozalid on YouTube. And it was being promoted on the radios, and the young lady who's promoting it, she was astounded because her father had something similar, and he'd given up. And people were young people were telling me that their relatives basically
were giving up. Yeah.
And I thought, how could you give up? Because you're alive and you want to have a life, and you want the quality of life to be as eventful and as fun and as fulfilling as possible. Why would you not try your best to get as much out of it as you can whilst you're here?
Yeah.
But different mindset, I guess.
I guess so. But it's a wonderful message. If people can sort of have that mindset about don't give up. And I think it's a message for, whether you've got a brain injury or whether, you're just feeling a bit low today, just don't give up, right?
Yeah. And when you say that, it makes me think, I took it when I was going into the schools before the pandemic. I was getting invited in, and it was quite challenging because I only have so much capacity in my brain now, and then it's like your battery on your mobile phone when it's running low or it needs to be replaced, and you keep trying to use apps and stuff on this dodgy battery, which you know is going to run out. It's a bit like that. Once it's run out, that's it finished. Yeah. So going into the schools would always be quite challenging. Would I have enough capacity and energy to do it? But the message I always gave the school was, I've been doing these silly poems actually since I was about 6 years old. So I'm probably in my 7th decade of writing the same silly poem in different ways. But I say to the children, well, find something that you really like, that you really enjoy, and keep doing it throughout your whole life. And you can have breaks. You can stop doing it for a while. So whether it be horse riding, or whether it be football, or whether it be painting or dancing, find the thing you like as a child and keep doing it for your whole life, because you'll always come back to it. I can see your cat. It's very nice.
Yeah, she decided to just jump on my lap right now. Yeah, so perfect. She's enjoying listening to you as well. So.
I'm sure. Yes. So always do the thing that you enjoy, and always have something to go back to, because you don't know when it will be really important to you.
Yeah, that's a wonderful message for us to end on. So, Sid, people can find your books on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do have some. Not just under my bed. I have a little office. I have some in a box in the office, but probably Amazon.
Okay. And so they can go to your website and order directly from you as well?
No, I haven't done that because it's too confusing for me. So I actually work within my own limitations. Fine. And people don't recognize that. So I was looking at, so 5 years ago, I'd been all over a website, but now it's been like, my brain's very clunky, so I don't do that.
Fair enough.
You can get into, I'm on Instagram as Sid Ozalid, and on Facebook I have the Sid Ozalid Mega Fan Club page. Brilliant. And I not put my bad dad jokes on there that I either make up or steal. And people write to me during the pandemic and say, thank you for these really bad dad jokes. And I say, how dare you, I'm a grandfather. So,
all right.
I'm going to read one more.
Thank you so much. Yes, read one more. That would be lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Which I wrote when I was in Africa, because I was in Africa. And there was lions on honeymoon, and I actually thought the lions were stuck together, but I was explained that they stick together for 2 weeks. So, and this is a bit of sex education now, if anybody has a cat. Tigers can actually have sex 250 times in 3 days. So don't date a tiger, that's all I would say. Right. This is called Lazy Lion. Lazy lion, lying all around, lying on the grass, lying on the ground, lying on the sofa, lying on the bed, lying on top of the elephant's head. Oh, said the zebra, that's not fair. Now that elephant's got lots of hair. Look at me, I'm bald and stripy. No problem, said the lion, who got all bitey. Oh, said the zebra, let go of my leg. No problem, said the lion, you'll soon be dead. And I'll be a lazy old lion, lying on the sofa, lying on the bed, lying on top of an elephant's head.
Oh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sid. We're going to say goodbye now, and we'll. I'm just so thrilled to have spoken to you this morning. It was fabulous. Thank you.
I'm going to go under my bed and see what I can find there. You take care.
Will do. Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye. If I can find the stop recording button. There we go.